Lydia mentioned these soil health assessment SHA principles. We've heard about 4 soil health management principles. What are these soil health assessment principles, and how did we get here in the first place? How did soil health assessment become a hot topic for Virginia NRCS? So I thought it'd be good to dive into some context. This is what I'm going to say, a brief, unofficial history, right, of the relationship between NRCS and soil health assessment, for whatever it's worth. But it is definitely unofficial. Phase one of the NRCS Soil Health Initiative, in the early 2010s, like 2011, 12, 13, really a very simple and effective strategy, what I call soil health show and tell. And the focus was on keeping it simple, farmer case studies and testimonials, hand-on demonstrations, a lot of evangelistic energy, and a vision for regenerating soil and empowering farmers to understand and not see soil science as some kind of scary black box, but something they could relate to and they could learn how to manage, right? And this article is just an article online but I really like the title, How a New Way of Thinking About Soil Sparked a National Movement in Agriculture. And what you see here is, Ray Archuleta, who was the face of this kind of approach to NRCS promoting better soil management, and, doing some demonstrations with some students. And, this is soil health show and tell. Well, what happened before long was measurement of soil health started to get mixed in. And some key voices, including Ray, began informally pushing the Haney test nationwide. Now, the Haney test is a respiration test, and there were some other extractions added to it. And, it has a lot of merit. But the one thing that wasn't there and still isn't there was nationwide calibration. So if you're going to promote to farmers and crop advisors to use a test, but there's no calibration research, you're going to run into some problems. And so there really was some meaningful, some true potential, I should say, for measurement without meaning. And in some states, it did undercut NRCS credibility and land-grant relationships. And there was some confusion and room for controversy. So just have this picture here, just an example of a publication with land-grant authors asking, are Haney tests meaningful indicators of soil health and estimators of nitrogen fertilizer credits? And, I think there's some merit in the question because there just wasn't that much calibration. I know it's something we discussed here in Virginia. But then if we look at the national soil health, NRCS soil health picture, I kind of think of it as we've now moved to phase 3. And what's happened now is there's definitely been a shift. One of the shifts is that we've made it official. I mean, soil health assessment has been formalized in a number of NRCS policy documents, but the direction is a little different because we have new leadership at soil health at NRCS at the national level, and they've moved away, from this sort of Haney test focus, and that was an informal focus. It wasn't ever in any official public policy documents. But what we do have now is these leaders have published official policy that promotes nationwide use of certain other soil health assessments, right? And some of those, we just have to be honest, have little or no calibration research or guidance to help explain, how do we interpret or apply the assessment results, right? And some of the assessment that we have, assessment strategies we have in our policies, they don't address key questions about practical implementation in real world NRCS offices, right? So we still have today more potential for what I call measurement without meaning and some confusion and controversy. Here are some examples of some of the policy documents. They're quite recent, really, when you think about it. I mean, this was updated November 2019. That's only 2 years ago. This technical note recommends certain soil health indicators and associated lab procedures. And really, there's nothing wrong with this document. I mean, there's some real good content. But what we're talking about here is, again, there's now a recommended NRCS method for assessing bioavailable nitrogen. And that is, and there's a lot of merit to this method. The point is that if you're going to recommend this nationally, we don't have any calibrations to help farmers actually get a quantifiable estimate out of it in terms of numbers of pounds of available N. So it has to be, the results have to be used the right way. That's all we're saying. And here, for instance, microbial diversity, again, PLFA, yes, it's a test. How do we use the results, right? So in terms of making the measurements meaningful, these guidance documents, don't get us all the way there. Another important document that's more recent, only a year old, this Cropland Infield Soil Health Assessment Guide. So this is the idea here is that our field staff are going to go out and do 11 different, or potentially 11 different in-field assessments that are going to tell us, do we have a problem with compaction, soil organic matter depletion, aggregate instability, and so forth? They're practical questions. How do we actually get this done on hundreds or thousands of acres that are being evaluated for a time-critical contractual issue? Where we got someone applying for a contract to address soil organic matter depletion issues. Can our field staff practically get this done? So more potential for confusion and measurement, maybe without meaning. Finally, we look at this is our current national resource concern list and planning criteria. So, for organic matter depletion, officially, our field staff used to just have a tool, the soil conditioning index, that we focused on for assessing, which direction is organic matter headed in. Now we have a lot more choices. The infield soil health assessment worksheet that I mentioned just before, also a soil health management system that addresses organic matter depletion. I'm not sure, what is that? How do we rate a farming system as to whether it is adequate for soil health to be a soil health management system? But we can also use tests, right? It's right here, soil tests that shows organic matter, labile carbon, or labile bioavailable nitrogen trends at or above typical value or for a high functioning soil. So we can use soil tests too. So there's assessment, right? And woven into these relatively new policy documents, and it's up to us to figure out how to apply all that. So again, some background context, but I want you to understand, why is this so important to Virginia NRCS? Well, because we have policy documents that say we need to be doing soil health assessment. But what we've done in Virginia, our soil health initiative, kind of our first phase, officially kind of in 2013 or so, we've tried to focus on what seemed to work so well. Keeping it simple, farmer case studies and testimonials, hands-on demonstrations. And we have actually, up until really this year, actively avoided talking about soil health assessment, and therefore actively avoided the associated potential for measurement without meaning and some of the confusion and controversy I alluded to before. But as our soil health strategic plan says, we need to shift to greater emphasis on soil health assessment. So this is just a quote, but what it pretty much says from that document is, it says that we focused originally on promoting easy to understand soil health implementation principles, and we've supported that with farmer success stories and demonstrations. And that's been effective at inspiring action and building consensus. If the time is right to our next phase includes greater emphasis on soil health assessment. And so, in May 2020, it was a really great exercise that I was asked to do or forced to do. Every state was supposed to do it, but we took advantage to really think through what is our strategic plan for soil health. So it's 11 pages long. The document addresses many issues, but it also includes about a page or two on soil health assessment. Okay, and so what our plan is to make a meaningful stepwise incremental shift to soil health assessment. And so while we talk about 4 principles of soil health management, this plan also conveys some key principles to guide our shift to soil health assessment. And some of those principles of what soil health assessment should look like to Virginia NRCS, some are explicit in this plan and some are implied. But really, getting back to what the Shaw sessions and the Shaw group were put together to convey these principles and test them out and see what you thought and take steps, incremental, meaningful steps towards getting some soil health assessment on the ground. And so what I want to do now is go through what I'm saying are our 8 key soil health assessment principles that are in our strategic plan. Then we'll be ready to say, okay, well, what have we learned from our Shaw sessions about these principles, whether they make sense or not. So the first key idea or principle: remember the ultimate goal of any soil health activity that Virginia NRCS takes on. Our ultimate goal is to positively impact a land manager's decisions or actions. So when we're talking about soil health assessment or Virginia NRCS, our primary audience for the results, right, the numbers that are going to come out the other end, is not going to be academics or the deep experts. I mean, we want to somehow get these soil health assessment results to real world farmers and advisors to impact them. Okay. Second idea, partnership is a priority, and this is a key underlying theme of our entire soil health promotion strategy. So it is more important to Virginia NRCS, at least it's stated in our strategic policy, that we have alignment with our state partners, especially our land grant partners, because testing of soil is inherently associated with land grant. We have to have that alignment. And that's going to be more important to me as our lead soil health person than, if you will, blindly following any guidance from outside the state. Which is why it's so great that we have so many land grant partners, even on this call today, and who've been working with us. A next key soil health assessment principle that we have, or that we are proposing, is important and should guide what we do, is starting with the end in mind. And another way to look at it is ask why, not how. So our premise is that the project's purpose, whatever your project is, should drive your choice of soil health assessment strategies. And when you hear yourself asking, okay, how should we assess soil health? That is a trap. Always start by asking, what are we going to do with the results? And then you work backwards to determine what is the appropriate assessment to use. All right, next. We're halfway there when we get this one done. Soil health assessment can and should include a range of assessment approaches, right? So we have a tendency for some folks to just jump right to a certain vision of what soil health assessment means, which may be, okay, we want to put dirt through some kind of procedure to measure something about the dirt. But we suggest there are 4 distinct strategies that can be used, that can complement each other, and there's also different levels of intensity that you want to apply depending on your project or audience. So you just may not have the money to do a $150 protocol of soil tests for one field. It's just, you may not have that, so you got to use something different. So just throwing in a visual aid here, this is something that many of you seen before, but this idea that soil health assessment, the NRCS idea is that we can involve, and Virginia NRCS can involve 4 distinct strategies. And a big one is indirect assessment based on management of the soil or system. So we can model what the farmer has done, and we can think about, well, does that suggest soil health is going to be good or bad? And actually that's used in human health all the time. A profile of how you manage your day-to-day diet, exercise, stress level, sleep, that is a very, very good predictor of your health, at least for certain functions and certain health issues. And that then, of course, should be complemented by direct assessment of the patient, right? So we can measure properties of the soil in the field or in situ, or we can take soil to the lab. And then finally, we have other assessments, right, based on outcomes. Is the soil washing away? That suggests that its health and its management is not in a good place. Are yields, continually increasing? Does the farmer observe better infiltration? Okay, so these are strategies that can be used, and we need to be open to using all of them. Last half of our soil health assessment principles. It's not about the numbers, but about the understanding. The catchphrase is no testing or tools without training. You can have the best soil health assessment strategy in the world, and it can provide meaningful numbers. But if you don't have education and follow up and show and tell to help people trust these quality numbers and understand how to apply them, it's not useful. They're just numbers. There's no understanding. We also have to avoid measurement without meaning. So our assessment strategies have to be practical, and we want to, as much as possible, keep it simple, minimize our number of choices, but we have to match our strategy to our resources. And so if it's going to be practical, the strategy we employ has to match up with the amount of time and money we have available. Here's number 7. We must adjust national protocols, NRCS or other protocols for soil health assessment to our needs, regardless of policy documents and deadlines. If it's going to be meaningful, we got to do it right. It's going to take time and partnership. And this is the last one, and I framed it in a way that might spark some discussion or maybe even some pushback. But if everything I said already, is true, then there is not, and there will never be, a universal suite of soil health assessments that is useful for all regions, purposes, and audiences, even here within Virginia. We need to stop looking for a silver bullet of the soil health test that will tell us how well a soil is functioning, because there are too many different projects and purposes and audiences. And so what we need to do is start investing in understanding and in education on the topic of soil health assessment so that our users can adapt soil health assessment to their particular projects and needs, right? So it's an education, an understanding, and an empowerment approach. It'd be nice to say, oh yeah, here's your soil health test that you use in conjunction with your basic fertility test from Virginia Tech. It's not that easy. Now we're ready to back. What were our goals for our SHAW and meetings, and have we achieved those goals? And I'm going to summarize it pretty easy, pretty concisely. I mean, Lydia already covered this. Our goals for this work group and for these meetings was to share these guiding principles, and we've tried to integrate them in various ways through these sessions. We want to get internal, that means NRCS staff, and external partner feedback on those ideas that I just covered. And we want to also better understand what our staff and client needs are, and what our partners are doing and thinking. And we did these 13 sessions. We invited partners in some cases, but the early sessions in particular, we actually didn't have any external partners in the first 4 sessions. The first 3 sessions, there were no external partners invited, and we really dug into what some of our most engaged NRCS staff were thinking, and we'll go over a little bit about what they told us. What Lydia and I feel are the conclusions from all of this effort is that these guiding soil health assessment principles that I just went over, they've been endorsed or echoed by our staff and our partners consistently in various ways across these meetings. In some cases, they were explicitly endorsed. And, like you'll hear, our field staff are like, we need assessments that make sense to farmers. If it doesn't make sense to the farmer, why are we doing it? Right? So that's explicit endorsement. But in a lot of other cases, our proposed principles, guiding principles of soil health assessment, are endorsed indirectly or implicitly by the partners who've given us presentations. So there's key elements of many of our partner projects that reflect these ideas. I'll just throw one out there real quick. The PASA's soil health benchmark study. There's so many illustrations of how that very elegant project implements a lot of our guiding principles. And one is, creating outputs that make sense to farmers. Another principle that they illustrate is the idea that you don't just have to test soil. You can also get meaningful assessment of what's happening by assessing the farmer's management. So, for instance, they calculate days of living cover in a crop rotation. And that requires not measuring the soil, but measuring what the farmer's doing, right? The management. And our conclusion, again, for you all to consider for today, is that we should continue down our current path, and we should keep using these guiding concepts to help guide where Lydia goes and some of you guys go in helping me and NRCS figure out, what does useful soil health assessment look like in Virginia and our region. So that's it right there. I mean, this is the punchline to this whole presentation. The plan now is for Lydia to take the mic again and talk about just some summaries and takeaways from selected past seminars. But I do want to pause and ask, as we transition, any questions or comments on all this that I threw at you?
Sure, Chris. Rory here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for your leadership within Virginia. It's stopped a lot of the, you mentioned the Haney soil test, and it caused a lot of confusion at the national level. So thank you for your partnership with land-grant universities. Just, you said there's no silver bullet for soil health testing, and I would completely agree with that. I would just say where I'm thinking along is like when you look at our realistic yield expectations, there's no realistic yield expectation across all soils. We break soils down into soil series and productivity groups. So where I'm looking at is maybe as a scientist, maybe we can break soils out into different series or different productivity groups or something like that, and come up with, within your group of soils, is there a CO2 burst test or something else that can give you some measurement with meaning. So I think we will move forward. I mean, when you look at routine soil testing, it took decades to get it right. So for soil health testing, we're in the early days, but I think you're going down the right path.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the positive feedback. What I think about sometimes, I think about what do we do with routine soil testing? I mean, we focus on fertility, and like the purpose is to know how many tons of lime am I going to apply, right? For the pH, for example, and the buffer pH, and you can learn more from a soil test than that, but you think about the purpose, and the target audience is pretty narrow. And that's the thing about soil health, that I think it can mean so many things to different folks. So noting, like, Ann Coates just joined us, and she's gonna be like, why are you talking about me when I just got on? But Ann is, without question, Ann is very interested. She's coming to us with a strong interest in carbon sequestration, and in some of the climate impact stuff. And so what I'm getting at is that falls under the category of soil health assessment, I would suggest, because and so I'm not going against what you're saying here, Roy, but I'm just saying that it's not just soil series, but it's also purposes. Who's your audience for the test result, and then how much intensity goes into it, and which soil functions are you most interested in? John Anderson, gave a presentation and is partnering with us in multiple ways on the idea of how do we assess soil compaction, that particular flavor of soil health and issue of soil health. How do we assess that rapidly on thousands of acres in a way that can give farmers actionable information? That is so different, than kind of what Ann has, has been more interested in, which is carbon sequestration potential of soil. So, and yet there's overlap. It's just complex. That's the one thing our sessions have revealed, is there's a lot of great work happening under this banner of soil health assessment. If you look at it broadly, and NRCS is interested in all these aspects, it is complicated.
Hey, Chris, Robert Shoemaker, I'd like to just share something we saw this week, if I may, briefly.
Okay, sure.
So we did a little demonstration research trial at Paul Davis's, and of course, Paul very well, been doing long-term no-till for 15, 20 years, and Harry Vetch cover crops. Well, make a long story short, with the exact same nitrogen rate across the field, we obviously didn't get the nitrogen response that we would normally see in our current recommendations. But anyway, across that field, we had yields anywhere from 170 up to 280 bushels with the same nitrogen rate across the field. And so that just tells me, I don't have answers, but what it does tell me is this thing is much more complex than just picking a yield goal and putting a constant N rate based on yield. So it's amazing when you're sitting in the combine to see these yields go up and down across the field based on the various areas and soil types within that particular field. And so there's something else going on just other than N rate and yield goal, in my opinion. So just wanted to share that.
Look, the topic of nitrogen availability to corn, why is that such a big deal? Well, because that's where most of the agricultural nitrogen fertilizer is applied, right, in Virginia. And that is a big concern economically, and it's a big concern, environmentally. So, but that just if we look at soil health assessment in that context, how do we figure out how well the soil is providing? And as some of you know, that is a humongously complex issue with all kinds of implications, and that's just a subset, really, of soil health assessment. One of the challenges we have, Robert, is that when we say soil health, we need to usually add some sort of qualifier. This is the aspect of soil health I'm talking about today.